We're talking about the Detroit Lions on the Our Lads Football Network, Our Lads Football YouTube channel. And whenever we talk about Detroit Lions football, we welcome, hope he shows up, this man, Jeff Risdon. How's it going, Jeff?
Good to be back with you. Thanks for having me on.
You know, Jeff, appreciate it as always. I'm very surprised and disappointed that this is the next time that we've spoken. I was hoping that we'd have a much better opportunity to speak, maybe to preview the Super Bowl or something.
Yeah, that didn't work out well, unfortunately.
No, but look, the writing was on the wall when Hutchinson and McNeil went down. And I know it's hard for fan bases to get that. I know some do. Some are realists. We've been doing this long enough. You don't win Super Bowls when your top players aren't around.
Yeah,
and that was a tough one.
You know, they had a legitimate good starting defense entirely on IR. And then when Amik Robertson went down, like that would have been their 12th man. So like it was brutal, Greg. It really was. Like watching all those guys get hurt. A couple guys like Alex Anzalone did battle back and get back on the field, but my goodness, it was like pretty much any defensive player you can name other than Brian Branch and Terrion Arnold was hurt at least one point last year. And actually Branch like stumbled off of a couple of games too. So it was brutal, man. Hoping for health this year as much as anything else, because to be honest, the biggest reason why the Lions didn't achieve what they could have was because of their health. Wasn't anything talent related.
No. I mean, I don't care. I'm not saying it wouldn't have been close. I'm sure it would have, but especially the way things turned out, the only thing preventing Detroit from winning the Super Bowl in my mind were the injuries. That's it. This was their year.
Would have at least liked to have seen it, play out with them being healthy. I think it would have been a lot of fun to watch.
It would have, but these are the unfortunate breaks that some franchises have to deal with. And we talked about how important it was to try to get it this past year, because sooner or later, the assistants were going to leave.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a big, big season ahead with the new staff, basically on either side of the ball, new guys in charge. We saw what happened at Philly the year after the Super Bowl, and they chose the wrong guys, and it was a disaster. And then they came back, chose the right guys, and they won a Super Bowl. I'm sure Detroit would take that, but you don't want to have to fail the first time if you can avoid it. So let's start there. Let's start with, of course, Glenn's out, Ben's out. So tell us a little bit about the replacements.
Yeah, so let's start on the offensive side of the ball, because that's where more changes happened, and that is John Morton coming in from Denver, where he was the passing game coordinator. Worked very closely under Sean Payton with Bo Nix as a rookie quarterback last year. He is a former Jets offensive coordinator back in 2017.
Yep.
He has admitted that he wasn't ready for the job at that point. He also had that was not a good roster. No offense to Jets fans. That was not a good roster at all. And he washed out and went away with, I think their entire staff actually got fired after that season. So he was here in Detroit, though, in 2022, where he worked as an offensive assistant. And so he knows the coaching staff. He knows Dan Campbell, knows Jared Goff, was involved in building that offense with Ben Johnson and Jared Goff, and Dan Campbell certainly was involved in that too. So he's a familiar face coming back. He's got a shot at redemption at a place where he's comfortable and coming in, and this isn't a case where they need a lot of like overhaul or anything. He needs to keep the trains running, keep the engine tuned up, and he can put his own stamp on things. There's certainly ways that he can do that, but the I don't expect a lot of change under John Morton, other than maybe a little bit more sanity in some of the play calling schemes and blocking schemes that are out there, because there were times like, look, Ben Johnson's brilliant as an offensive coordinator and guru. There are times where he's like, you can see the offensive lineman be like, I got to do what on this play? And I think that's going to go away, because I think that was Ben's biggest contribution to it. So, he's new. They lost a lot of assistants, just a few of them. Scotty Montgomery is moving to wide receivers from running backs. He's also the assistant head coach because Antoine Randall L. went with Ben Johnson to Chicago. JT Barrett, the assistant quarterback coach, went to Chicago as well. He's been replaced by I wrote that down because there's so many new coaches I got to keep track of it. Oh, Bruce Gronkowski, former NFL. I got to keep track of who's in what position here. They brought Tashard Choice in from Texas as the new running backs coach. He was Jahmyr Gibbs' college running back coach at Georgia Tech before Gibbs went to Alabama. Came very highly regarded. And former Stanford head coach David Shaw, who was with Morton in Denver the last couple of years, is the new passing game coordinator. So they made a lot of changes. Tanner Engstrand went to the Jets with Aaron Glenn to be their offensive coordinator. So they had a lot to do. And also Tyler Roll is the new tight ends coach. He was Iowa State's something at Iowa State for the last couple of years in various offensive capacities. He was North Dakota State's offensive coordinator is what his claim to fame is before he was there. And he's got a lot of energy. My goodness. I met him over the weekend down in Indianapolis. And he claims he doesn't take caffeine, but he seems very highly caffeinated at all times. So
that's probably why he doesn't eat it. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking about because I remember talking to Matt O'Leary about Engstrand and trying to get his take. So whenever you have the guys under the guy, and you just don't know. They try to talk, like you just said, look, they're in charge of this, and obviously it's not always the top guy. We get that he needs help, but until they do it themselves, until they're calling the plays, you just don't know. So, what was the difference, say, between those two, between Morton and Engstrand?
I think Engstrand is much more of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. He's not a guy who's ever going to be comfortable in front of a microphone or in front of a group of people. He's much more the brainiac who's happy designing things. If you're familiar with
a good place for him, then, New York.
Yes, it is. It's a very good spot for him. And Aaron Glenn trusts him very much. He's very much like Ken Dorsey in that regard. Kind of a guy who's like got a ton of thoughts, got a lot of creativity. He analyzes things very quickly and processes them well, but he's just not a dynamic personality. Morton isn't either, by the way, but he's a little bit more comfortable, and has more experience at it. That's one of the reasons why the Lions went that way. But yeah, Engstrand, from my understanding, was never like a serious candidate to get the job in Detroit. That they interviewed him. Obviously, they were open to keeping him if they couldn't find somebody better. But I think they found somebody better. So that's the deal with Engstrand.
Okay, so let's go on the defensive side.
Yeah,
Calvin Shepard takes over,
and this was the easy prediction. A lot of us in Lions Land suspected that Kelvin would be taking over. Now, he had offers. He could have gone with Aaron Glenn. He could have gone to a couple of other places to be their defensive coordinator. He is a guy that, because of his close ties with college, with LSU specifically, has been mentioned as a guy who could be a potential head coach in college. And actually interviewed him, was it 3 years ago? And he said at that time that was one of his goals in life, was to become a college head coach. Now, he's doing pretty darn well from where he's at. He was the linebackers coach, did a fantastic job developing Jack Campbell from year 1 to year 2. Has done a great job with Alex Anzalone, with Malcolm Rodriguez. It's a very strong linebacking room, and he takes a lot of credit for that and takes a lot of pride in that. Just a natural leader, very easy extension of Dan Campbell to run in the defense. So he was a pretty easy choice there.
Okay. All right. And the other name that I do recognize is Casey Rogers, because I remember when he was with the Jets, he ran their defense for a few years.
He's a Todd Bowles guy, and has been with Bowles for a long time. Was in Tampa Bay.
Okay.
He is the new run game coordinator and defensive line coach. Takes over for Terrell Williams, who is in New England. That's a loss. Dan Campbell even talked about it as combine podium interview, like, we're going to miss Terrell Williams. But Casey Rogers, they go way back. They were together in Dallas when Campbell played. I think in New York as well. So he comes in. He's going to help Shepard, who's never done this before, Rodgers is a former, defensive coordinator, and he will certainly help on that.
So he's going to be like his right-hand man on defense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, the defensive line coach has been, unfortunately, a rotating door under Campbell. Hopefully we get some stability there because there's a lot of guys who have, Aleem McNeil is entering his fourth year. This could be his fourth offensive line coach. So
okay.
There's been a lot going on with that. So hopefully Rodgers brings some stability. Look, he is definitely a veteran presence. Then they brought in a couple of like lower level assistants who I'm not that familiar with. I know who they are, but I don't know like what they're going to offer to the Lions. But they kept Deshae Townsend at the cornerbacks coach. Sean Dion Hamilton bumped from assistant to full-time linebackers coach. He's a rising star, former Lions player. He actually retired on a Tuesday and was named their assistant linebackers coach on a Wednesday a couple summers ago.
Who was that?
Sean Dion Hamilton, former Alabama player.
Oh, okay. So you believe he's someone to watch?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's certainly a rising star as a coach. He's completely different from look. Shepard is a very gregarious guy. He's somebody that if he meets you once, he's going to remember your name and share it with you and be very open, very loquacious. And Sean Dion, I've been in a room with him for over an hour before, and I think I heard him say 2 words. It's just not he's not a talker. It's not who he is. But he's a very effective coach. The players who have been coached by him love him, and that's one of the reasons why he's still around.
So would David Shaw, do you think he's going to be the right-hand man for Morton, considering all of his head coaching experience? And I know he's been out of the game for a little while, but that seemed like a really smart hire to bring in someone. Because David Shaw, like 5 years ago, there were a lot of people saying he was a head coaching candidate in the NFL until things just fell apart at Stanford.
Yeah, and he and Morton, they call each other best friends. They've known each other for a very long time. They actually, in their first coaching job together, lived together. So they go way back. So, yeah, there's certainly a comfort level there. But Scotty Montgomery he was the running backs coach and the assistant head coach. He kept that. Now he's moving to wide receivers. He's a guy that there's going to be a lot of input from him. And Mark Brunell, the quarterbacks coach who returns, he certainly has input on and helps speak with and for Jared Goff in terms of what's realistic for Goff to do. Goff really speaks up for himself on that too. But it's a seasoned offensive staff. It's different, but I'm not going to expect a lot of radical change from what we've seen because again, Ben Johnson was certainly he was the play caller. He was kind of the wizard with the wand over the base of everything, but the base I think is going to stay pretty much the same.
Okay, let's take a look at the depth chart. The Ourlads Detroit Lions depth chart, best in the business at Ourlads. And before we
100% true.
And before we get into taking a look at free agency for the Lions, then we're going to get into their top 5 offseason needs with free agency just a few days away. I want to remind everybody the Ourlads 2025 draft guide comes out on April the 7th, 8th, I think, right around there. So that means you're going to be getting it a couple of days later after it's mailed out. So you want to get one of these babies as soon as possible, get on the short list. So as soon as they get mailed out, you'll be the first one to get it. Check out the link in the description area for the depth chart, for the draft guide, as well as, of course, for all of the changes that are going to happen in the coming days for agency. We're going to be updating these depth charts by the minute. So you want to know what's going on and how the depth charts are going to look for your specific teams, go over to the ourlads.com depth charts. Matter of fact, we have a link in the description that can send you right over to the Lions page, as well as our Lads Insider, in case you hate the ads on our Lads, and who doesn't? The Insider, you purchase that, you get rid of the ads, among other things. So check that out. Link in the description, where also you can find out all the cool stuff of how you can follow Jeff with his shows and his content. So that's just check out the description area there. It's got all the links, a ton of them. All right. Let's go over this free agency list now for the Lions. And, offensively, there's not a whole lot for the Lions to really be worried about, it looks like the only player that is the most intriguing is Zeitler.
Yeah. He was the starting right guard, was great. As we talked about when they signed him and in the preview, he doesn't like stand out, but he never loses. Like, he might not win a lot of reps, but he never loses. And that was very effective in the complex blocking scheme that he was asked to do. And they would certainly love to have him back. I think he will be a priority, but yeah, he's got to be replaced. Just looking at that, Bridgewater, obviously, Hendon Hooker will be the number 2 quarterback. Teddy will be going back to coaching Miami Northwestern High School, where he did a fantastic job. He was this has been a very hot topic in Lions Land, because when they brought Teddy in, a lot of folks instantly assumed, oh, they don't like Hendon Hooker. He's not like this. This was a very specific situation. The more that I've learned about it, the more I think it was pre-planned, like even before the season, that he was going to go do this. And then after his high school coaching season was over, was going to rejoin the team and help mentor Hendon Hooker. And that
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, they wanted, and Dan Campbell said it straight out, like this has no reflection on Hendon Hooker. And it's interesting how many people trust Dan Campbell and love how candid he is and how honest he is, and they think that he's lying about that. I'm still processing that, but yeah, so they don't need a number 2. They might need a number 3, because Jake Fromm is probably replaceable in that capacity. But other than that,
so if a team called the Lions and said, hey, this Hooker kid, he's just going to be sitting a bench there as long as Jared's playing, I think we'd like him to, potentially compete for a starting job. And this of all off seasons, because I don't care what anybody says, this draft class quarterbacks is just pretty bad.
Yes.
And whoever takes these 2 quarterbacks in the top 10 or the top 5, they're crazy. So, but that's their job. So, but the point is that there are going to be GMs out there that are, hey, we need quarterbacks, and there's not a whole lot of young guys out there, but Hooker's one of them. You have to put him in that list of young guys who haven't been given a shot yet. So do you think that could be something to keep an eye on?
I'll just say this. The Lions very intently went about upgrading the number 2 quarterback spot after riding the Tim Boyle, David Blau carousel for painfully far too long. You just talked about how bad this quarterback market is. Where are they going to find a number 2 that they trust more than they trust Hendon Hooker? And that is,
it would take a lot.
Yes, it would. And the other side of that is Hooker hasn't been great when he's played yet. Now, he obviously missed the rookie season with the knee, but last year in training camp, he had moments. He also had times where it's like, and we're hoping that gets ironed out with a full offseason healthy behind him, understanding more, having better chemistry and communication with the receivers as well. Yeah, I would be flabbergasted if they. First off, I don't think like the New York Giants, the New York Jets, the Las Vegas Raiders, I don't think that they're going to see him as a starter at this point.
Sure.
I think it's more of he can come in and maybe, compete to be our backup. And if he wows us, it's kind of in the way that like Taylor Heineke did once upon a time. There's a couple other quarterbacks that have been like that. Jacoby Brissett did that once upon a time, where they thought he might be a number 2. And then he just rose up. Kirk Cousins actually started out that way in Washington. Yeah, it's probably the best example of that. But I don't think the NFL sees Hendon Hooker as a starting caliber quarterback at this point. I could be wrong about that, but I just don't see that.
Okay. It's interesting that the team was so explosive, and they were very fortunate to have someone like Tim Patrick stay healthy and give them some good production, even though they get production out of the tight end spot and the running game and out of the backfield and the passing game better than most teams. So there's that. But I guess what I'm trying to get to is you would think that with this high-powered offense, well, they'd have 3 really good, scary receivers, wide receivers, and they really only have 1.5. Williams is coming on now.
Yeah.
So anyway, do you think Patrick is a guy that, with all the money the Lions have, $51 million at this point, it looks like, I don't anticipate he's going to cost much. It's just a good home for him as the number 3 guy, and then maybe add another young kid in the draft?
That's exactly what you would do here. You bring him back. Look, he's 32 years old. He missed 2 full seasons and has missed parts of 5 others with like big time.
It's amazing he's even playing.
Yeah, it's astonishing that he stayed healthy all through last year. You can't count on that again. You obviously bring him back and let him compete and do what he can, but you better have a very, very strong plan 1A, not even plan B. It's got to be like A2. And that's whether that's a draft or a young free agent or something like that, because they don't really have anybody else, even in the pipeline. They had Isaiah Williams, who made the team out of Illinois as an undrafted rookie last year. He's now in Cincinnati. He got poached away. So they don't have a young up-and-coming receiver in the wings to take that role. So they're going to have to do something there. But I hope Tim Patrick's back, because he fit the culture so well. And was just so appreciative that they gave him a chance. And I think he'd like to reward that. And I certainly don't see any reason why the Lions wouldn't bring him back. But again, he can't be the only solution. Like, he's got to have competition for that role.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of restricted free agents, the number 3 tight end Zylstra and the number 3 running back Reynolds. You think those guys are just going to get like ordinary sheets and they'll be back?
I do. I could see a world where Craig Reynolds winds up being valuable to Ben Johnson in Chicago, because he's a very good number 3 running back. But he's the best pass protector on the team, and he doesn't play a lot in those situations, so you don't really get to see it. But in preseason and in training camp, like, he lights dudes up. And he's a very effective between the tackles runner. Look, he's going to get run down from behind. He's a 4.6 speed guy, but he's really good at maximizing what's blocked for him and getting everything out of what he can do. He's also a very good special teams player and as a potential return man option. So if they tag him with the right of first refusal tender is I think it's $3.2 million. I could see him being worth that for another team. And I think that at that point, the Lions. They drafted Sione Vaki last year in the 4th round. It's right there in front of me, the 4th round. This is why this is good, Greg. It's right up in front of me. That's great. I love it. I think that they could probably part with him for that if somebody really wanted him.
Okay. And again, you think Zeitler is gone?
I don't know about that. They can afford to pay him. Look, it's not a great year to need guards. In free agency. Now, in the draft, it is like the
Lions might get the first guard in the draft. It's possible.
They very well could, and that would be. And they do have Christian Mahogany, who started the playoff game and did very well. And he also had a cup of coffee audition towards the end of the season. He got another start when Graham Glasgow was out and played very well. So I would say they're comfortable with Mahogany jumping up into a starting role. The issue is that Graham Glasgow was awful last year, and it might be
a cut
time.
Candidate.
I don't know if he's the cut candidate. Because he is the backup center as well, and he can be your utility offensive lineman, interior guy. Look, he knows the guys, he knows the team, he's capable. But he really struggled with the speed of the game late in the season. Now, there are schools of thought that he was injured. I would not buy that. He wasn't moving well at all. And injury would explain some of that. But he's getting up there. Probably shouldn't be a starter anymore. But again, they've got cap room, so they can afford to have him be the top reserve and not have to bring somebody else in. So if that's the case and Zeitler goes away, then they're certainly going to need a guard. And look, just looking at their depth chart, look at their backup tackles. They need help there.
I did the mock draft with Dave Syvertson, our lead scout, a couple of weeks ago, and I had the Lions. And I talked about how at this part of the draft, knowing how the Lions have built and that offensive line and how it's been so successful for them, and we talked about this last year, about it was almost time to start getting that line depth going, because we knew the writing was on the wall for this offseason. And so I went ahead and actually took the kid, Zabel, out of North Dakota State. Yeah. Because he's like that typical Dan Campbell type of guy.
Yes.
So but the bottom line was that he's taking offensive linemen and maybe several, or again, like you said, with a lot of cap space, you would think maybe there is at least something out there that they could bring in. That's probably where they're going to be very active this offseason, correct?
I would guess so. I'm not sure that Colby Sorsdal is going to make it back for another season. Aushika is a restricted free agent. He's certainly welcome to come back. They seem to like him more than what his play would indicate it probably should, but he's been in the system for a while. But Dan Skipper, look, everybody loves Skip. He is the best sixth lineman in the league when they play him. But he's a guy that they've cut him just about every year. He always comes back. If they cut him again, he'll be back.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that.
And Giovanni Manu was the giant wild card. He was the 4th round pick last year. They traded their 3rd round pick in 2025 for him. Canadian college basketball player turned football player. Look, when you see him just stretching and warming up, you're like, oh my God, I get it. He's a physical specimen. And he had a couple of plays in training camp last summer where it's oh yeah. But there was also, and I've heard this from a very reliable source, when they drafted him, he literally did not know that he could move his left foot first coming out of his stance.
Okay.
That's how green he was.
Yep.
So he's a lot
probably not ready this year either. Not to start.
I wouldn't put it past Hank Fraley to have him ready, but yeah, that's asking a lot.
It is
to have him ready.
But either way, even if he is, you have to have somebody else just in case.
Yeah, so they certainly will need somebody there. And again, the veteran market is not great. There's a lot of Lions fans that are coveting Jedrick Wills, easy for me to say. And I will say from covering him in Cleveland, no.
I know. Why would you want a disappointing guy in one place, bring him over here? Especially you're going to have to pay him, because that's the thing. Everybody wants linemen because there's so few of them that guys will get overpaid that do not belong in that category. And you mentioned Mahogany, and we've talked about this before. I mean, really, it's all about health with him, isn't it? I mean, I remember this kid I think when he was ready to turn into a junior, I believe, there was a lot of talk about him being a first-round talent. Then he gets the injury, and he had an
ACL. Then last year he got mono, the day before training camp started. So he missed the first. I actually think he missed all of training camp.
Wow.
He was in the rookie mini camp and then mini camp, and I don't think he was at training camp at all. If he was, it was only the first week. So he was on the NFI list for a long time.
Okay. Wow.
So hopefully, again, he was
one of my good off season.
He was a top 50 player on my board last year. The fact that they got him in the 6th round was a delirious excitement experience for me on that draft Saturday. I'm very, very comfortable with him going forward as a starter, but still need to get more.
Yeah. Okay. Defense. And
there's a lot of green there. Holy crow.
There is not a lot of important stuff offensively, but a lot more important here on defense. So up front, and this is where really things fell apart. But I mean, Davenport played only a couple of games before his injury. Yeah. Kaminsky preseason.
Yeah.
Now here's a nice story though. Is how do you pronounce his name again?
Onwuzurike.
Just
Onwuzurike. You don't pronounce the word. Onwuzurike. You leave out the W-U.
So, I mean, wow, nice story. Because we were having these conversations about thinking there's no way this guy is going to probably play again.
He has come back from spinal fusion surgery. He's the only person to ever have the surgery that he had and make it back to the NFL, make it back to any professional sport.
Good for
and
him.
He's done it at 290-ish pounds. It's incredible. He played more snaps than any other defensive lineman for Detroit last year. That's
great.
He didn't do a lot with them. Yeah, they would absolutely love to have him back, but not playing as much as he did last year. Like, he got 1.5 sacks. He's solid against the run. I wouldn't say that he's like great against it. If he's your number 3, number 4, I mean, he can play inside, he can play outside, he can play the 5-4-5 if you want him to do that. They love that about him. But if you're asking him to start, probably asking more than what you're going to be paying for him if you're luring him from the outside. And that's, that's not me as a Lions guy wanting to keep him. I'm just like, he had a lot of opportunities to do things last year, and he got 1.5 sacks. I think it was 26 pressures, which is okay. But if you're going to be paying $10 million for that, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And look, the Lions were beyond extraordinarily patient with him. And I think that means something to him. So I kind of expect him back. But hey, at the same time, this is a guy who's had back surgery. If some team wants to give him $30 million for 3 years,
take the money.
God bless you, dude. Go get it, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's nobody in Detroit that would fault him for that either.
Yep. I don't know who would do that, but let's.
Who knows?
That guy might not be around much longer. Okay, so also up front. Okay, so Davenport and Kaminsky. Do you think they will be back?
Davenport's going to have to be a vet minimum if he wants to come back, and Kaminsky's a tough one because he had fallen down the depth chart. He actually got injured about 10 feet in front of me working with the 4th team defensive line in a training camp drill. Just all these guys that they brought in, guys like Pascal. Anzarike was ahead of him. Makai Wingo, who's injured now and might not be ready for the start of the year, worked his way ahead of him fairly quickly. So it's going to be tough for him. I think he's 30 now. Okay. It might be time for him to move along, which is sad because he was a fantastic find. Was that 4 years ago? Campbell's first year. They picked him off the scrap heap from Atlanta, and he came in and did a very good job. He's a great guy, fits the team very well, but he's kind of lost his spot, unfortunately.
Okay. And anybody else there on that defensive line worth keeping?
I can see Pat O'Connor returning because he plays a lot. He's like Anzarike. He can play all over that line. And that's something that under Aaron Glenn as the defensive coordinator, they loved that versatility. They love those tweener guys who can do a lot. That's why they drafted Wingo last year. I don't think he would be a priority signing. I think he's a guy that, like, okay, they didn't get any offers in the first couple of weeks. Hey, let's give you $500,000 more than you made last year, and you can come back and compete for a role. I think that's what his fate's going to be. Petco, by the way, could be that way too. He did really, really well before he got injured last year. Had put himself in position to compete for a starting job. And unfortunately, as has happened with him a lot, his body failed him.
So it sounds like to me that you're looking at maybe those 3 top defensive tackles return, meaning they're set once again at defensive tackle. If that happens,
could be.
But the outside guys, Kaminsky and Davenport, probably not going to be back.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they're gone for sure, but it would take some things to. It would take failing at landing other guys to have those guys back. Is probably the best way to say it.
Okay. Barnes, linebacker.
God, I hope he's back. I want him back. But he finally found the home at the Sam linebacker position. And he had bounced around. He had turned himself into a solid starter at an off-ball linebacker. But the Sam linebacker in this defense is a stand-up pass rush first role. They typically line up over the tight end. And if he stays in the chips, you bull him. If he releases, you sometimes run with him. Sometimes you turn him over to the strong safety or the slot or whatever. But he was doing really, really well. And when he played, the Lions had the number 1 defense in football. Wow. Unfortunately, he got hurt in week 3. And they never replaced him. They tried a bunch of different dudes. There's a lot of those guys that are in green right there. Trevor Nowaski was probably the best at it. And I like him as a backup, as a reserve linebacker, a special teamer, but he was out of his element, unfortunately, as a starter in that role. But like all these, I'm just looking at Ezekiel Turner, Anthony Pittman, Ben Neiman, who I do think that they want back. They tried Jamal Adams in that role. They tried Quan Alexander in that role. Just like they couldn't ever replace him. It would be wonderful to have Barnes back because he is a true homegrown success story. Part of the first draft class, and he's been a hallmark player, and I would love to see him back. And my guess is that they're going to value him more than other teams do, but again, It's free agency. You never know. Somebody could go wild and be like, hey, I think he's going to be, a 10-sack guy in my defense. Probably not once. He probably caps out at like 8.5 in Detroit. Like, if somebody wants to pay you,
yeah, sure.
Go get it, man. I never fault the players for chasing the money while they can get it.
All right.
Can't do that.
And you think he'll be healthy? Everything sounds.
Yeah. It sounds like he's progressing pretty well. We got an update about him. Was it late January? And he obviously wasn't going to be ready to play at any point this time. He had a ACL and MCL, is my understanding. So it's a long road back, but again, it happened in week 3 last year. So he will have almost a full year to rehab it before getting back on the field.
Okay, sounds like a nice reunion there. Makes sense. Secondary. So we know the revolving door it was last year, and Carlton Davis. Tampa Bay fans probably understood everything about what happened there with Davis. Playing well enough and then getting injured again. And so what do you think? Did they trade for him with the idea of locking him up eventually, whether the injury came or not, or is now that even more eye-opening that, wait a second. Yeah.
I think that it wasn't just one injury is the thing. He had I think it was a bruised knee. And then he had a game. He broke his thumb in practice, blocking or trying to get off an Amon-Ra St. Brown block. He broke his thumb. So he played like a month with a club on. And then he broke his jaw. Like,
wow.
He got hit by a running back leading with his helmet, dropping the crown and hitting him in the head. By the way, Davis, no penalty on that play. Call that, please.
Anyway, it's the NFL. What do you want?
Yeah, I know. I want more. I want better.
Yeah, right.
I want consistency. Yeah. Yes, I really do. But he was fantastic as a corner. He was exactly what they wanted. So much better than Cam Sutton was in that same role. I have to think that he's their priority in bringing back because, look, not only was he really good on the field, Terrion Arnold was like a puppy dog to him. Like, mentor me, please. and it worked. And Terrion's arrow's pointing way up on Terrion going into year 2. He had a pretty good rookie season too, all things considered. So I think that they would love to have him back, and that keeps Terrion as your number 2. It keeps Amik Robertson, who was really, really good as the number 3. He can play in the slot. He can play outside. That solves a lot of potential offseason issues if they're able to keep Carlton Davis.
Okay. And what was the reason that he went on injured reserve?
He had a broken jaw at the end.
The jaw was the one. Okay.
Yeah, the jaw was the one. But he missed one game. Might have been a hamstring. It was nothing serious.
Okay.
But as you mentioned, Buccaneers fans know this very well.
Oh yeah.
It's a guy who's never played more than 14 games in a season.
Yep.
And it's not one of those where like, okay, he's injured and just misses 3. Like he's going to miss a quarter here, a half here, a game here, a game here. Like that's kind of what he's done his entire career. Look, the Lions have become somewhat of a repository for those sorts of players who have chronic injury issues, and you just hope that you can get the best out of them. That's why they signed Davenport last year. Like he's kind of the poster boy for that. I hope they bring Davis back. And it certainly sounds like they want him back. And I couldn't imagine him not being amenable to coming back to being a starting cornerback on a Super Bowl caliber team.
Yes, and especially because they have the money, so it's just a matter of making sure that they don't overpay. You don't want to overpay, but all right. So then, with all the injuries, so you see all these other guys. Matter of fact, what Vildor played the whole season, Dorsey played most of the season, Mosley did not, Melifonwu not really. So, who do you think they want to bring back?
That's a tough one. Khalil Dorsey, I think, will get some look because he was one of their best special teams players. He can also double as a return man. He can play safety and cornerback. And a couple of the other names that you see there, Morris Norris. They have Lauren Strickland, who's an undrafted free agent, who finished the year on the practice squad. He's on the futures contract. That's all their depth there. I do not expect Melifonwu back. This is a guy that he's again, lots of potential, lots of injuries. And this was a guy that he was injured during the season and they had to activate him off of IR to put him immediately back on so they could activate him again so they could make roster moves. That did not sit well with a lot of people in the building. Let's put it that way.
Wow. But and it really did seem like he was
the end of 2023. He was really good.
Yeah.
I always call it the Jabril Peppers role just because that's what he did. Sort of the heavy slot safeties hybrid linebacker role. He was really good at that. And that's a role that the Lions never really filled. They tried Jamal Adams, who's another very good example of that type of player.
Okay.
He was done, unfortunately. But I just don't see him coming back. I think some other team needs to take that risk. And I would expect that it's also not the New York Jets who take that risk. Between some lines there.
Yeah. That kid from South Carolina who had that awesome combine.
Amenwari. Yeah.
He
could be that guy.
Yeah. He could be that guy.
Yeah.
All right.
Whew.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if his combine numbers take him a little bit too far up the draft boards. But a lot of before the combine, he was like a late first, more than likely early second round guy. Now, who knows how far he can move up the draft boards.
He had a fun. He was fun to watch.
Yeah,
I've been to a lot of combines. It's very rare that the media section there gets up and applauds a guy when he's done with his workout. And that happened for Amenwari. That tells you how rare of an athlete he is.
And all you got to do is watch his tape, and you're like, wow.
Just don't ask him to go backwards. If he's going forwards or sideways, that's phenomenal. I'm not sure that he's aware that things happen behind him. On the field.
That's why that hybrid role would fit well for him.
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't have to worry about that. Okay. So then pretty much, so none of the other guys, a DB.
I mean, Kendall Vildor is, the fans hate him because he had a ball bounce off his face mask. He's actually he's not nearly as bad as Lions fans would tell you that he is, but he also doesn't inspire a lot of confidence.
Okay.
I wouldn't surprise me. He is, in fact, the fastest defensive back on the team. Fans chastise him all the time for being slow. He doesn't play that way. It doesn't apply to his skills very well.
I know. That's like when I see this kid from Iowa State. When I first heard about his draft stock about a month ago, I was like, I don't even who. And then all of a sudden, I see the combine, and he has great. Okay. I guess I figured that's what it was. They were pre-targeting this combine. He's this type of an athlete. But that doesn't. I'm sorry. It's like, for instance, the two corners from Kansas, and I know the one guy. I know he doesn't have like that athletic. I draw dropping kind of athleticism, or the type of numbers that this kid had. But the kid makes plays, and that's what I'm interested in if I'm scouting these guys. And I know you have to have certain measurables, but just because the guy runs fast, just because he runs a 4.29 doesn't mean he's going to be a good corner. I'm sorry. It drives me crazy when it happens.
I would rather have a 4 or 5 guy with great eyes and quick feet. But
sure. Absolutely. So, all right. Let's go to needs.
Yeah.
Good segue to needs. What would be? Do you have like your top 5 needs already?
So I do a starting defensive end edge opposite Aiden Hutchinson is the biggest priority on the team.
Okay.
You've got to get a nose tackle / defensive tackle. Reader is a potential cap casualty.
Okay.
He's expensive for what he offers, but at the same time, the unfortunate part, he had a really bad end to the season. He had a rough time to have his worst couple of games, and that did happen to him at the end of the year. But he's a glue guy, but he does make a lot of money. But even at that, he's good for one more year. And the Broderick Martin experiment to this point has been a failure, unfortunately. He just hasn't worked. So they've got to get somebody in there. And Ali McNeil might not be ready for the beginning of the year coming off of an ACL. So a somebody who can impact the quarterback from the defensive interior is up there on the list. They absolutely need a third safety because I don't think that guy's on the roster right now. And then we talked about offensive line. They need 2 of them, whether it's guard, tackle. They don't necessarily have to be immediate starters, but guys who could maybe start in 2026 or 2027 and be better than the backups that are there now. And I think that's a very likely path on day 2 of the draft. And then even if Tim Patrick comes back, but especially if he doesn't, they've got to get a wide receiver with some size. Because if you're 3, look, when Jamison Williams, who is 6'2" and about 185 pounds, is your big guy.
Yeah.
You don't have a big guy.
That's true. That makes a lot of sense. And there are guys out there that fit the bill. So they'll be out there. I know that Higgins guy is about 6'4", speaking of Iowa State.
Jaden Higgins he's a guy that would certainly gender interest from the Lions, I would think.
So edge is first. And so you're saying that, do you think that safety or offensive line would be third behind?
I would go with offensive line there. Third. Just because the offense, again, we're dealing with Ben Johnson's offense, and
yes,
one of my worries for him in Chicago is that the offensive concepts that he wants to run don't work without a great offense. Not just good; they got to be great.
Yeah,
and he doesn't really have that.
No, he's got good. He's got okay. But
they actually
like
just traded for Jonah Jackson too, which is an interesting one, predictable one. Good for them. Right. I think it's a decent move for them.
Sure,
paying a lot of money for him, but he certainly did well in Detroit. Can't fault him for that. Yeah, the Lions line is the engine that drives everything, and they can't afford a drop off. Now, obviously, if Penei Sewell gets hurt, look.
Oh yeah,
you're not going to find a backup for Penei Sewell.
No,
those guys don't exist. Yeah. But if Taylor Decker gets hurt and misses a month, they need somebody better than what they've got now to put in there and fill that role. And Decker's a guy who I think his contract's up after next year. Okay. He's in his 30s. He's played a very long time. He's really good, really good. And there's no sense of trying to run him out of town, but having a succession plan in place, probably not a bad idea. And again, Manu could be that guy. And that's one of the big unknowns going into this offseason is how they view him and how far he's progressed out of the public eye, because we've actually never seen him practice with close practices. We only get to watch him warm up.
Now, is Ragnow, are the Lions still like under the impression that at any time he could call it quits?
That has abated, thankfully.
Okay.
He feels much, much better.
Okay.
I don't think you can put that out of the back of your mind, but it's not a front page issue like it has been in the last couple of seasons. When he's dealt with a toe problem for a very long time. He was in a lot of pain at the end of the 2023 season, and had actually thrown out a remark that we in the media probably took a little too far. As that he thought he might be done. Wasn't that way, but he gave he's never felt better, and I believe him when he says that.
Okay.
So again, wouldn't be bad to have a guy who you could groom. And by the way, Kingsley Aguakun, who was an undrafted free agent last year out of Florida, is on a futures contract and will be given every chance to prove that he can be that guy. We'll see.
Okay, there he is. All right. And this is a very deep class for defensive tackles. So
yes,
that is, if you're looking for a position, that is very fortunate that happens to be a position that is just going to be filled with tons of defensive tackles. So
and you're gonna see a lot of projections to Detroit for Derek Harmon, Kenneth Grant, Tyleik Williams, all with that first round pick. I'm not sure that any of them make it there, but if they do, they would certainly fit.
Well, the good news is again, it's so deep that's the question that a lot of these GMs are going to have with the running back, defensive tackle, and what's the other position I'm thinking about? The ones that are really, really deep where
I think tight end is very deep.
Tight end. There you go. Yeah. Those are the three. So do I take the blue chip guy now? Or do I take another position because there's so many of these other guys later? That's going to be the question. Same thing with Genty. Do I take him now? But I got so many other talented running backs I can pick up in round 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah. What's the gap between him and Amarian Hampton and
not
Johnson
much,
and the Ohio State guys? Yeah. Like both those guys, Judkins and Henderson had fantastic combines.
Yes, there's
a lot of really good running backs in this draft, and I do think Jonty's he's the top, no doubt about it. But is that gap is it here or is it here? And these teams going to have to weigh that.
Well, every general manager is going to have a different opinion. So
that's right.
It all depends on who wants him first. Okay, so which players, you mentioned a couple of already, so maybe we could even put him down for one. Give me another couple of guys, future guys, developing guys that fans outside of Detroit aren't familiar with that could actually maybe take over some spots relatively soon.
Yeah, Chris Smith at defensive tackle coming out of Notre Dame has been on the active roster a lot. He's played some. They would certainly be comfortable with him being the number 4 defensive tackle. He's solid. He's never going to be a guy who makes plays, but he's another one he doesn't get beat that often. He does what he needs to do. Smart, fundamental football player. So he's a guy that could fit in that mix, especially if a guy like O'Connor doesn't come back. So he's one. Lawrence Strickland, I think, is still down there at safety. He's a guy that made a big splash. He is a headhunter is not the right word. Remember Joey Browner back in the day?
Sure.
If Joey Browner was modern and came out of Ball State, that would be him.
Okay.
Everybody who's under 50 has no clue who Joey Browner is.
Yeah, well,
look him up, folks. He should be in the Hall of Fame. Won't ever get there, but he should be.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around. Okay, and then
we got a whole other show on that, Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other maybe recent late picks or free agents?
So Nate Lynn showed up there at defensive end. He had a nice camp. Isaac Uku also had a nice camp. Lynn had some juice, man. He unfortunately got a little bit banged up, and I think it was the second to last. Second preseason game, second to last, technically the same thing. He came out and looked very good. Had more juice than I think we expected. It was one of those deals where they brought in a lot of inexperienced guys. They brought in Matthew Betts, the CFL sack champion.
Okay.
And Lynn was very clearly better than him. Isaac Ukwu was as well. Mitchell Agude, I believe is still around, was also better than him. So they've had some guys down there. Look, Jamarco Jones is going to play forever as a practice squad call-up type offensive lineman. He's a great example of there's so few offensive linemen. He's never been good, but because he's not terrible, he continues to exist in the NFL and probably will for 5 more years.
I'm sure he'll take that.
Good for him.
Right. And Vaki, do you think, like you said, it all depends on whether or not they let Reynolds go. What's your guess? Do you think they're really, because 4th round pick, you want that to turn into something. So is it too soon?
They've had good luck. Like Jamar Jefferson is still lingering around. He was their 7th round pick from 2021. They've found running backs, I think where Reynolds really stands out is special teams, which is also where Vaki is at his best. They drafted him, and Dave Phipp, the special teams coordinator, said it. Like, he was my guy. Like, yeah, he ostensibly plays running back. He's on this roster because of special teams. He has a lot to learn as a running back. Remember, he was a safety at Utah. The Lions, to my knowledge, were the only team that saw him as a running back over a safety. So, there's a chance for him. It would be nice if he proved worthy of being the number 3 if Reynolds isn't back. But again, who knows what's going on with Craig? It's paying $3.2 million for a running back who maybe will play 125 snaps of ball.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money.
Yeah. Even though you have it, you could probably spend it somewhere else. Okay, so before I let you go, how is the draft capital?
We have first, second. It's 28 and 60. They traded their third for Vaki. They are going to get a compensatory pick at the end of the third round for the Jets hiring Aaron Glenn as part of the whatever they called it, minority hiring initiative, whatever it is. And we expect that to be number 101. They're supposed to announce that at any time now. Normally we learn by the end of the combine when those comp picks come out.
Okay.
We'll figure that out soon.
Okay.
They do have their own fourth. They do not have a fifth. They have 1/6, and it's not theirs. I believe it's the Jets' 6th round. And then they have 2 7th rounders. One is theirs, and one is the Eagles, I believe. They have a Cowboys pick, one of them too. So they've been like Brad Holmes, especially on day 3 of the draft, and is somebody who that's my favorite day of the year. And I would love to be able to enjoy it more, but Brad Holmes makes so dang many trades that I have to keep writing up that I can't just soak it all in.
Right.
I would expect some movement. Again, we're having the massive debates in Lions Lane now. Do they trade up in the first like they did last year for Terrion? They've done that in the past to go get Jameson Williams. Do they trade back, which is how they got Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta and Brian Branch and Jack Campbell all in the same draft? Who knows? It's going to be a fun month to figure that one out.
And by the way, you mentioned but I noticed that Raymond is making. I think that the Lions can save about $3 million if they were to move on from him. Mabin about $2 million, but Mabin
he will be gone. They've already made that decision.
Be.
Yeah, they've already made that announcement over the weekend. He won't be back.
Okay, so they're going to cut him. Got it.
Yeah.
But Raymond, how about him?
They love him. He is their number 4 receiver. He can play outside as the speed demon. Look, he's tiny. He's 5'8" and has the smallest waist of any NFL player I've ever seen. But they love him as a return man. For his size, he blocks his butt off. He's one of those guys that they kind of got him off the scrap heap from Tennessee and gave him a chance more than he'd ever been given before, and he rewarded them. It's going to be tough to see them give that up unless they have better use for those dollars.
Well, they've got a lot, so this is where they can keep it. Yeah. So it makes sense. All right, Jeff, another great job as always. Awesome.
My pleasure coming on. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I look forward to talking to you right after the draft, which is not going to be that long now, only about a couple months, a little less than that. It'll be here before we know it. And we can talk about how the Lions went this offseason, even though it's funny that we say that because it's really just, it's in this 2-month period that everything happens basically. Yeah. So and then of course we're going to, like I said before, we got links in the description for all of the content, and especially because I know you're not on all the time, but you got the Detroit Lions podcast and on the YouTube channel there. That's available for everybody to check out, which is obviously you guys do a great job. Lions fans really appreciate it. And we appreciate it as well.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mr. Risdon. I'll see you in a couple of months.
All right.
Thank you.